You're watching CW Montana. This is the MTN 9 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger. We begin with new developments in the search for a missing Park County teen. More than 150 volunteers had spent the past 2 days searching in Paradise Valley for 15-year-old Rez Wyndham. Late this afternoon, the teen's body was discovered. According to a news release from Park County Sheriff Brad Bickler, the body of Rez Wyndham was found around 4 o'clock this afternoon, several miles from where he was last seen. Wyndham went out for a run Tuesday evening around 7 o'clock in the Emigrant area and never returned. The 2-day search included Park County deputies, Park County Search and Rescue, dogs and horse teams, helicopter, and more than 150 community volunteers. No other information is being released at this time, including cause of death or whether or not foul play is suspected. Well, after 10 weeks have passed and nearly 200 searchers were deployed, the case of a missing Great Falls woman has ended. MTN's Lindsay Hyatt has details after investigators finally found the body of Amy Harding last night.
On the night of January 26th, Cascade County Sheriff's Office responded to a disturbance call at the residence of Amy Harding Perman. Before she went missing more than 2 months ago, Harding was last seen walking from her house around 8:30 p.m. That night, deputies searched Buckshot Island, a region near her home, where they found personal items that led them to believe she was nearby.
This is where we found some items. We found a name tag. We found a coffee card.
Deputies also found a hole in the ice the next day that led them to focus their search efforts on the river. Sheriff Slaughter said they didn't disclose this to the public due to the nature of the case.
We treat all these cases as if they're criminal from the beginning. If we publicly release that we found a hole in the ice, if we're interviewing people and let's say that there was foul play involved, they're immediately going to point to the hole in the ice as the reason that she went missing. So I'm absolutely not going to release that for strategic reasons in our investigation.
Now that Harding's body has been found and her family has been notified, Sheriff Slaughter encourages the community to take the final step in the case.
I think now we need to pray for Amy's family, and her friends and her loved ones in this community, because quite honestly, a lot of people in this community mourned over this situation. So I think right now that's the appropriate thing, is that people grieve and go through their appropriate processes.
In Great Falls, Lindsay Hyatt, MTN News.
Harding's body was taken to the state crime lab in Missoula to determine cause of death. The Carbon County Sheriff's Office has released the name of the man killed in a shooting south of Red Lodge yesterday. The victim is 43-year-old Chad Rockman of Billings. Sheriff Josh McQuillan says detectives are still investigating what led to that shooting. Happened a little after 10 Wednesday morning, about 6 miles south of Red Lodge. McQuillan says a woman was with the victim and another man and woman were there during the shooting. The sheriff could not say anything about a suspect, but says all three are cooperating with investigators. Well, New York State set a new record for coronavirus deaths with 799 people dying Wednesday, but with glimmers of hope. Governor Cuomo and several other governors agree with health experts who say moving too fast to reopen the economy could risk another wave of infections. CBS News correspondent Michael George is in New York.
This silent killer.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo compares the coronavirus to the 9/11 attacks of 2001. But the virus has already been even more deadly.
It was a silent explosion that just ripples through society with the same randomness.
New York's statewide death toll is surging above 7,000, and its more than 160,000 confirmed cases surpasses Italy, Spain, or France. Cuomo says based on slower growth in hospitalizations, efforts to flatten the curve seem to be working, but he doesn't want anyone to let down their guard. President Trump is forming a second coronavirus task force focused on reopening the economy. But the decision is not up to the administration. Governors will make the call, and some are already rejecting the time frame.
Until we have a vaccine, which is months and months away, I would not risk having large groups of people getting together anywhere.
Others have warned a hasty return could cost lives.
I do worry that if we rush back to work, as some of the rhetoric has implied, you could have a second and third wave of this pandemic.
No one wants to reopen America more than President Donald Trump, but the president's told us we need to do it responsibly, and we're going to follow the data.
With the staggering number of deaths around the country, there are pockets of inspiration. This woman in Georgia left the ICU to the sound of applause, while this man in Arkansas came off a ventilator to continue his recovery at home. Michael George, CBS News.
Around the world, there are more than 1.5 million confirmed cases of the coronavirus. Earlier this week, we reported what seemed like some encouraging news that the number of deaths and hospital beds needed here in Montana for the COVID-19 crisis may not be as great as originally thought. It was based on a model that the White House uses to make such projections. The very next day, Governor Bullock extended the stay-at-home order for 2 more weeks. He defended that at today's news conference and also said it's important not to rely solely on models.
And I understand it's easy to turn to modeling, especially the ones that give us that most optimistic look as we all search for answers and a better understanding of this virus, how long it may last and how much worse it could get. I certainly want to open back up non-essential businesses and operations as soon as we can. I want us to be able to celebrate the lives that we've saved together with our healthcare workers, rather than just howling for our healthcare heroes from our doorsteps each night.
The strength of one's model is dependent on the understanding of the science of the current situation. And with COVID-19, a lot is still unknown or only partially known. The second part of modeling is that modeling does not predict the future. It helps us describe possibilities of what could happen depending on what interventions we implement today.
The governor said he wants to reopen things again, but that will depend on all of us continuing to social distance for at least a while longer. The number of confirmed positive coronavirus tests here in Montana jumped another 22. As of 10 this morning, that number now at 354. That's up from 332 yesterday. 6 people have died. That has not changed. Gallatin County again seeing the biggest jump. It has 8 new confirmed cases, bringing its total to 128. Yellowstone County adds another 4. Our number now 52. Stillwater County reports its first case, a man in his 50s. The state says 157 people have recovered from the disease. Well, tonight we get a better understanding of what those sickened with COVID-19 go through. This after 2 local patients were recently sent home from the hospital after battling complications. Q2's Andrea Lutz reports.
Health professionals are giving us a better understanding of how COVID-19 can impact those in our community.
They would say that it's the worst, it's a combination of the worst cold and worst influenza they've ever had.
Nancy Iverson specializes in infectious disease at Billings Clinic. She spoke with me about how patients she meets with are faring with the virus.
And then it's a cough. And when I've talked with people on the phone, they sound like they have a bad cold. And they sound like it's many people that it's in their chest.
She says the virus affects the lungs and people's ability to get oxygen, but that a cough can be prolonged because of the damage done by the virus.
Many patients are able to go home. They're very tired. That's another complaint we're seeing is they're extremely tired and they sleep a lot.
But there's this. Patients in our community are experiencing a mild to moderate version of the disease, meaning many don't need hospitalization. Yet symptoms can change, and quickly.
Typically, if you get a cold, it maybe doesn't keep you from getting on an airplane. It maybe doesn't keep you from going to, events, weddings, birthday parties, funerals, all of which we're reading have been transmitting COVID to other people. And unfortunately, some people acquire this viral infection and don't do well and get very critically ill and have died. And that's tragic. Other people are experiencing it differently.
Recently, a Billings Clinic patient returned home after being hospitalized and placed on a ventilator. Another at St. Vincent also recently went home after spending a week in the hospital.
I don't think we know yet how it's going to come into our community. It's here. We're learning to live with it. We've had members of our community very ill. We know we've lost 6 Montanans who died from this virus. So I think it's balancing the seriousness of it and how it affects certain people. I think we have some control over how it plays out in our community.
Iverson says perhaps the biggest takeaway for everyone, respecting the virus. In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
The two patients Andrea mentioned in her story are among the 28 Montanans who've been hospitalized for COVID-19 since the start of the outbreak. But what is the outlook for Billings retailers as the coronavirus pandemic plays out? That's the question on the minds of many business owners in this new world. Q2's Jay Cohn spoke with Billings retail developer Steve Corning today to get his perspective.
How soon will the world of retail bounce back from the COVID-19 shutdown? No one knows for certain. But one thing local developer Steve Corning knows is no one is immune from the impact.
I have never seen a broader impact than what we're seeing right now, where literally everybody's affected. Before, I think some of these major downturns were maybe a little more concentrated in a particular sector like housing or mortgages, things like that. But this is across the board. It's unprecedented.
One of Corning's clients, REI, has put the brakes on its new Billings store off Shiloh Road, postponing its opening and hirings for the time being.
We're the developer of that building for them, and we've had to, obviously compromise on beginning of rent and start date. But that's the world right now. We're making a lot of accommodations to a lot of people, and they are to us.
Corning says he's encountered a very cooperative spirit in the current business world, telling MTN, if we meet people halfway, we're generally met halfway in return. Among the hardest hit are movie theaters.
I think people are worried. We talked to our AMC theater tenant today at their home office, and their concern is how soon will people come back to the movies? Will people react very quickly and say, gosh, we're so tired of being home and pent up that we need to go to the movies and get out and go to restaurants? Or are people going to be cautious? And I don't think people know.
So as this pandemic drags on, the concern builds. How long will the social distancing and the shelter-in-place orders remain? In Corning's words, the longer this goes on, the more arduous the comeback will be. In Billings, I'm Jay Cohn reporting for MTN News.
And to put the current economic slowdown in a different perspective, Corning says in Montana right now, there are 300 unemployed workers for every coronavirus case in the state. Well, as people await their COVID-19 stimulus checks, there may be some questions on the best way to spend that money and what families can do to better prepare for unknown financial situations. Gary Buchanan of Buchanan Capital recommends using most of that money on food and medicine. He says once you have enough food and medicine to last for up to 3 months, you can then focus on paying off bills. It's also encouraged that you call your creditors ahead of time if you're having any issues staying up to date on bills.
I think you just have to be very conservative. I think obviously one check of $1,200 plus some more money for your family can only go so far. But I would prioritize. I would plan on 3 months worth of food and 3 months worth of medicine, and have that planned for, and then start to work on some other bills. And I think that there are many of bills that are out there could be restructured with the creditors, but don't just not pay it. Contact the creditors, whether it's a utility or local government or a financial institution. Contact them first.
Today, Vice President Mike Pence said those stimulus checks should start going out by the end of next week. A controversial plan, years in the making, gets the call they've been waiting for. We'll have the latest on the proposed Black Butte copper mine. But first, Ed McIntosh is in next with your full weekend forecast.